What's up, everybody? We're back on Intentional with Miles Hunter.
What's up, JP?
Miles, welcome back to the studio.
Thanks, bro.
We're hanging out over here today. Last week, we talked about the idea of like how to handle the culture that we're in right now and a lot of the fleeting things. And I think for some people who have maybe been in their walk for a while, it was an introduction to something they already know, they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Hopefully for people who are maybe like still new to Jesus and to Christianity or to a relationship with God, there might have been some things that were helpful for them to kind of get their heads around.
Yeah.
But we left that conversation kind of saying, hey, what about those disciples, those people who are like, man, we need some like next steps for how we can be really intentional with the people who don't know God around us.
Yeah.
Because really you left us with this one idea, which was, hey, surrendering is the best thing we can possibly do in our walk with God.
Yeah.
Like that's the call. That's the
call.
thing.
Yeah,
we
that's
actually
what is
said
required.
like,
yeah.
Right? Like
Right.
we can go to church, we can get baptized, we can read the Bible, which is all like great introductions to it. But the thing is all about surrender.
Right.
But like, that's not sexy. And I think, I left afterwards and we said, man, like the people that I love that are not choosing God, they're chasing this culture and they're looking like all around and they're going like, well, this didn't deliver on what I thought it was going to deliver. This doesn't deliver. And each time they're like, they're burning themselves out in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And yet, we were like, man, but the truth, like what you came back to, I think was so good. The promise of God is that it's just the surrender and it's not sexy and it's not like it promises wealth and it doesn't promise health. It just promises that it is the access we have to the best thing that God's got for us.
Right.
Right. Which isn't typically like the best thing the world's putting in front of us.
Right.
And so when we left there, like with that conversation, it was just like, man, there is still more to say and to unpack. And so today, like I want the listeners to be able to get some super clear takeaways of like, man, I've got some people in my life and that sexy, like that message you said about surrender is not going to help them.
Yeah. This doesn't help because I could give them the message, but they won't hear it.
They're not going to do that. Like it doesn't align with the paths that they're on.
Right.
And so what the heck am I supposed to do with this? You basically just said like, the path to like the best life that God's got, to peace, to fulfillment, is this path that like people really just don't want. And unless we're broken, and I know a lot of people who are doing pretty good.
Right.
Like they're not really broken.
It doesn't seem like brokenness is going to come at any time.
And
or
maybe
woundedness
underneath,
is there. Yeah.
right?
They're wounded.
They got some things.
Yeah.
But they're not really like, they're not down and out. Their job's going well.
Right.
They got some great family or not, but they've got some good friends maybe that are hanging with them.
Yeah.
There's so many things that like feel like it's going well enough that like they would never identify.
They don't have anything to depend on or need anything to depend on.
And that's the danger we have in our culture today.
Yeah.
We have so much.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's self-made, baby. that's it. They're self-made.
So let's dig into this, man,
Yeah.
because, I think one of the challenges we said was like, there are some hopeful things in this very unsexy solicitation of the gospel.
Those are some saucy words right there. Unsexy solicitation. Pause. All right. Okay. No, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like we did. We walked away from the last conversation and it was like, man, there's more meat on the bone. And I wrestled with, there has to be another way to present the gospel. Mm-hmm. There has to be a more attractive way to present this other than give up everything, die to yourself. And the truth is that there's not.
Right.
There's not another way to present the gospel.
That is the gospel.
That is the gospel.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what gospel is, as we talk about it, as we use these Christianized words, the gospel is the good news. Like people in the Roman day would come around and they would say, hear ye, like we have good news. We have the gospel. And they would be talking about the king and the kingdom and the emperor and all of those types of things. Well, we now have a gospel, and the gospel, the good news that we now talk about is the fact that Jesus Christ came to save and purchase us from this sin sickness that was killing us, and has given us a new life with him. And so as we talk about the gospel, it is simply good news. But the question then becomes, if this is the only way to present the gospel, how do we win the person that has won the game of life?
Yeah.
Or how do we win the guy that is intelligent and the gospel is too simple for him or for her? And that's been a wrestling match that I've had often. And the first place that I think about going to, and that we were talking about, is like Paul, right? We look at Paul in Acts chapter 17, and I'm thinking about how Paul goes to Athens and presents the gospel first in the synagogue, and then these stoic and philosophers like come up to him and they're like, hey, will you come on top of Mars Hill, and we like your ideas, bro. You sound really smart. You sound like one of us.
Yeah, come join us.
Come join us. And so he goes to Mars Hill, the Twitter of the day, without media and phones, and it's where all of the greatest thinkers of the world would go. And Paul went, and Paul points to the Parthenon, which is a mile up the road that they can see, probably half a mile walk. And he's looking at the Parthenon, and he's like, in there, you literally have a God that is like the unknown God. I'll tell you who he is. And he presents the good news to them. He presents the gospel to them. And from what we know, none of them walked away connecting to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ. And so it's like, it's like, dang it didn't even work for Paul. So like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this and present this for my friends? And I think one of the first things that we need to know, or the first things that we can take away, is your friend's salvation, or the person that you want to connect to Jesus that is winning the game of life, that you're having a tough time connecting to Jesus. Just know that your salvation their salvation is not your responsibility. It's not. Because I feel like we have followers of Jesus that are listening. I feel like there's a lot of weight and a lot of pressure for us that's like, I have to connect my friend to Jesus. And it's like, well, that's not your responsibility. Well, you do have other responsibilities though, but you connecting them to Jesus is not yours. That is only going to happen by the power of the Holy Spirit of God. Like that's God's job. Your job is to plant seeds. God's job is to water, and then he'll produce whatever kind of fruit he'll produce.
And this doesn't mean that you're off the hook on planting the seeds. So
no, not at all.
To say it's not your job, you still have a role to play.
You have a role to play. Yeah, you have a very vital role to play.
But you're not carrying it all.
But you're not responsible for the life change.
Right.
That's not your responsibility. And so, but your responsibility is how you begin to live and how you begin to show up, and what it is that your life looks like to that individual on a daily basis. And that's the conversation that we're going to dive into today.
I love it. Well, let's talk about it, because I think, when we were talking about the idea of, man, our culture is so fixated on the game of life, and we're so connected today that it is incredibly discouraging, I think, when we look around at even like the fakeness of like, it's hard to even tell who's winning. Like this whole idea of like winning at the game of life, it's like,
are you really winning?
It's so fake in so many places.
Have you seen the Instagram video of the girl that's like the single mom that is that's like making cookies or a cake or something for her husband's, or no, not her husband's, but her son's like birthday. But she's on camera and she's like crying and weeping, and then like this guy mocks her and takes this like a camera, sets up all the lights and stuff, and starts like pouring creatine and stuff and making this shake, and it's like it's like, what kind of disturbing culture do we like? You don't know what people's lives. I say all that to say, like, you don't know.
Oh.
You just don't know
Yeah.
what people's lives are really like. You don't know if they're actually winning. You don't know if they're actually suffering. Like, you don't know. Like, that whole thing, it was like, did you really set up the camera so that you could make cookies and cupcakes to cry?
The crying on camera thing.
You don't know.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
You don't know. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know if it's real. You don't know if people are winning or if people are losing.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. Anyway.
But we know, like, so the thing that we can hold on to that we know is that, like, the game of life that we're so physically connected to,
Right.
Like what we see, what we experience on our daily life is a fake game, and I think you said, like, if you're winning even at this fake game, you're most likely losing at the real thing. And it's almost like, I think of, like, man, you finish that game without the satisfaction of anything, like, so I won, so what? And I think the problem with that is, like, when we are in the middle of it, we're going so hard.
Yeah.
We don't know what it feels like to succeed, like to hit the end of it and to feel like, oh man, we won, because there is always another layer.
Yeah.
Like, there's always a next level, right?
Yeah.
Like the dude with the boat, that's like the best circumstance. Like, you get best example. It's like, I've never met a guy with a boat who is never like, this is big enough.
I would say, like you said, that if you're winning in this game, you're most likely losing in the other. That's not always the case. Like, there are plenty of guys that are winning this game that are also winning the eternal life game.
Yeah.
I don't know if plenty's the word. There are a few. There are a lot. Like, we have them, guys that have won the game of life that are doing really well, girls that have won the game of life that are doing really well. But there is this humility and this heart posture that says, like, yo, none of this is mine. And you can see it in how they give and how they act and how they position themselves and the things that they do. And what's funny is 9 times out of 10, they're winning the game of life because they did things that were unconventional because they were following the promptings of the Holy Spirit of God.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, that's a whole nother rabbit trail.
This is almost like the premise of the conversation we had, which was like, there's a lot of preachers who would like to just preach that way.
Right.
Right. Like,
yeah,
follow God and you will get these things.
Right.
And then there's this whole, like, we're constantly living inside of this get these things life.
Mm-hmm.
Our jobs are always moving. Like, we're in this, like, crazy time, even as a culture, as a society, as far as growth, as economics are changing pretty wildly. I don't know what's going to happen with digital currency.
Right.
But I think that they're saying there's never been a bigger wealth shift than we've kind of experienced and we're experiencing right now.
Still,
like, it's there. To me, it just feels like, obviously, even like the US being the greatest country in the world, like, for a lot of people who are alive today, like, that has been the case.
Yeah.
In the next generations, like, that may not be, the US may not be the world leader.
Right.
These are, like, pretty massive shifts.
Yeah, there are large implications and significant possible truths.
We're not the first generation to experience those things. And I think what's cool about the gospel, right, and this good news is that it kind of predates all of what's happened in the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, and it transcends it all.
It does.
So it's like, it doesn't matter what happens, how you act in front of your friend that doesn't know Jesus, and how you respond to the chaos that is our world is probably going to be the best gospel that you'll ever share with them.
Yeah.
And I think the follower of Jesus needs to know that you may not and probably will not convince your friend with the gospel word for word as you tell them surrender. You can plant that seed when you pray for opportunity to present the gospel time and time and time and time again, and you continually plant the seed as long as they allow you and as long as you know it won't ruin the relationship. But you acting and functioning as an active follower of Jesus and operating in peace when chaos is ensuing, when their stocks are jacked up, when all types of, economics and politics are messing with their world, and really our world as a culture and everybody should be up in arms and everybody should be scared. When you still have peace, it'll be the best gospel you'll ever be able to preach to them. And that's the win.
So that's the intentional thing that we really can take away from this is that, can we convince people to surrender and that it is better? Can we make people be broken? Can we? Like, is that our responsibility? No, the answer to those things is no.
Right.
The opportunity we have, though, is when we are broken to be outspoken.
Yeah.
Wasn't going for the rhyme.
I like that. I like that. When you're broken, be outspoken.
Well, we've got to be outspoken. I think it's like it is our biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
To lead people to see like there is hope in the midst of that.
Yeah.
I hope, like for me, I grew up in a family that was a broken family.
Yeah.
And I remember like having a lot of friends whose parents were still together. And I struggled like, with my dad not being in my life, with a stepdad, like the normal things that, and I remember thinking like when I got saved, I was in middle school and I had become like a small group leader. I think by the time I was in high school, and I remember thinking like, man, I can relate to some of these other kids that are dealing with their family's divorce now because I went through that. So like, being outspoken about that brokenness I experienced was maybe like the first thing that I was able to actually start to connect, and then to be able to point to God, be able to point to the peace, be able to point to, hey, you may be looking at the game of life and going, my life just got completely uprooted. My parents just split. But I've been in a split family. I've been broken and I've seen what God is capable of doing and how he's been able to put incredible men in my life, how he's been able to restore the relationship with my dad, how he's been able to give me a great stepdad. Like so many cool areas where he's shown up and where I've been able to trust him, even where other men and other people have let me down.
Right.
God has like shown up in that. And so being outspoken, I think about those are really one of our biggest like opportunities.
Yeah. I agree. I 100% agree. Like your brokenness is a part of your story, so that like when your friend experiences any type of brokenness that you've experienced, you're able to share, hey, like I know it feels like a pit right now.
Yeah.
I know it does, but I can promise you that you can come out of it and it won't be you that pulls you out. I know a guy. I know a guy. I do. I really know a guy. And at the end of the day, that is like woundedness becomes brokenness when there is a redemptive factor. It's hard to allow people to talk about their woundedness because healing hasn't been brought to it yet. Everybody's wounded. Everybody is wounded in some type of way. Trauma has happened to everybody in some type of way. But when you're broken, when you've been broken, God has had to step into your brokenness and heal you. And in that brokenness, that's where when you share it, you can tell other people there is a redemptive factor to my brokenness, and it is no longer a wound. It is now a story and a testimony.
Yeah.
And so like that for people, but the only way that woundedness becomes brokenness is if you allow God to step into it. Yeah. That's where the surrender comes. That's what surrender is.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to allow God to step into my woundedness because I know it's something that I can't heal.
Yeah.
And no matter who it is, no matter how much of the game of life that person has won, they are still wounded. They are. There isn't healing to their wounds because they haven't allowed Jesus to step into it.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we tell people all the time, like, find out where somebody's wounded at. Like, if they're really your friend, you know their wounds. And so like, have you surrendered enough to the Lord to where the Lord has taken your wounds, made them broken things, and then brought healing to them so that you can openly share about your brokenness that you have surrendered to God. And in turn, they share to you their wounds. And then you can insert Jesus into their wounds and watch their wounds become broken so that Jesus can present them as redeemed.
Yeah.
And that would be the beauty of the gospel. And so it's like, one, know that their salvation is not your responsibility. How surrendered is your life to Jesus? Are you wounded or are you broken because you've allowed God to heal you? And are you sharing your brokenness with your friends? Because honestly, transparency begets transparency.
Right.
And so if you're transparent with them, the prayer by God's grace is that they'll be transparent right back.
We'll talk about what David's doing. Like, I think, when we're looking in Psalms, I love following the story of David.
Yeah.
Like, he's got a lot of ups and downs.
David's got a lot, like, that's why I always tell people pray the Psalms.
Yeah.
Because they're like, David goes through every emotion that you could imagine at some level.
Absolutely.
You are going to connect. And David even talks about people winning the game of life. Psalm 39, he's like, I've had to be quiet, Lord. I've kept watch over my actions. I've kept watch over my words. And I'm frustrated because the wicked are winning. He's
what season is he in?
I think it's like right after he sinned with Bathsheba.
Oh yeah, nice.
And so like I think there's already some wrestling matches within him internally, and you can look at the end of Psalm 39 and you're like, oh, maybe you are having some wrestling matches, because he even says at the end, he's like, remove your scourge from me, Lord. I am overcome by the blow of your hand. And so it's like, he's like, please turn away from me, God. Like I can't take your wrath anymore. I can't take you scourging me anymore. I'm sorry. But like even at the beginning of this passage, he's like, the wicked are winning. I'm tired of seeing them prosper. I'm tired of watching the wicked win, but I'm trying to hold my tongue. Yeah. And as I hold my tongue, my anguish is growing even more. Remind me that I am a mortal being, and that this life is only a vapor. This life is only a breath, but they are winning the game of life. Help me hold my tongue around them. Help me not be frustrated with them. And so even if that person that's winning the game of life, follower of Jesus, like if you're trying to be faithful, and you see people around you winning the game of life that aren't following Jesus at all, just remember, like this is going in a whole nother direction, but just remember that this life is only but a breath, and your victory is in heaven. Yeah. And I know that's hard, but it's an eternal perspective. And with that eternal perspective, the other side of this that David doesn't express in this psalm, the other side of this is like, what is Jesus's heart for them? Because they don't know that everything that they have is going to go away. And so David even talks about, he's like, he hustles and bustles about, but only in vain. He heaps up wealth, not knowing who will get it. And so he's like, it's going to be gone one day. And so your heart, instead of being frustrated or having to hold your tongue like David does, I love David. He's like, I'm pissed. I can't be quiet. I want to say something. I want to say something profane and profound to these people that are winning at the game of life and messing with me, but I can't. And so I'm keeping my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. Lord, just remind me that I am a mortal being and that this life is short. And in that heart, like we get to that place too. We get frustrated as we see people winning and we're not. In that light, it's also, hey, God's heart for them is that they would also connect to Jesus. And so our heart for them too should be, man, even though I'm not winning the game of life right now, doesn't mean that I shouldn't have this heart that wants to see them win.
Absolutely.
And also connect them to Jesus.
Absolutely.
And so, I heard this quote that it's totally not gospel. It's like, I want to see you eat, just not at my table. And it's like, well, that's not gospel centered at all. Like, followers of Jesus, don't take these quotes and put them on your Instagram that don't preach the gospel. Stop it. Like, don't do that. Like, no, I want to see you win, and I want you to eat at my table so I can connect you to my dad.
Yeah.
That's the whole picture.
Well, I think this is really good next steps. Like, I think we have locked in, to me, I think a good resolution to talking through helping people understand the surrender, knowing that when we surrender, that is when we can start to experience the goodness. This, like Miles, you're dropping life-changing knowledge here. If we can start to grasp this, we can impact the lives of the people we love that are around us, that our hearts breaking for, that are quite frankly, like they are miserable chasing, I even, this doesn't just go even for like, these are for people who don't know God at all. Yeah. Like there's people who are very close to God they find themselves in seasons where they have fallen. Chasing, right? And you can catch those conversations and we can start to see that like they're not surrendered. Right. And they're still like just fighting so hard for this thing that isn't at all what God wants for them. Right. And it's our job to love on them, to be an example, to be a light. And I think that your encouragement today to say like, man, that is our opportunity. When we see them hurting, like, that's the opportunity to talk about what God has done in us and to remind them to reflect that and to not screw it up by being jerks, to not screw it up by letting jealousy get in the way, to not screw up by letting our own disappointments get in the way, but to be fully surrendered to what we've got going on. It's like, it's a great cycle for us to every day, you know, like to be surrendering ourselves. And I love that idea that his mercy is new every morning.
Yeah.
So thanks for your word. Thank you for just unpacking God's word.
Yeah.
Not your
Thanks
word.
for his word. Yeah. Thanks for his word. I appreciate it.
And I love this. I love this part 2, talking about surrender and some practical next steps.
Yeah.
So next week we'll be back at it talking about how to be intentional with Miles Hunter.
Peace.